I love you for you, Isabella. Not because you're Sterling. Liam's warm words still echoed in Isabella's ears, a sweet melody she had clung to survive the last 3 days of the funeral. It was her last fortress, but that fortress had just crumbled with a single whisper. Let's be honest, he was just a lucky gold digger. The comment, uttered by a family acquaintance, made Isabella freeze. She was standing half hidden behind a large column, and the glass in her hand began to tremble. Lucky he died when he did, another voice chimed in, her cackle sounding grotesque. Now he gets to be the great love of the Sterling heiress's life, instead of some debtor about to be exposed. Look at the poor girl, still lost in that perfect little fantasy. A fantasy. The word fantasy made every beautiful memory Isabella had feel tainted. Their first kiss in the rain, the late-night talks, the promise of a simple future. Was it all just part of his plan? The pain of losing the man she loved was still fresh, but now it was being replaced by something far worse: doubt. Isabella scanned the room. The elegant guests weren't looking at her with sympathy. They were looking at her like she was a prize, a trophy that had just slipped from someone else's grasp. In their eyes, she wasn't a woman grieving a loss. She was just a name attached to a massive fortune. And Liam, her love, was just a lucky player in this high-stakes game of money. Her throat tightened. This wasn't a memorial. It felt like a trial where her love was being publicly mocked. For the first time in her life, Isabella hated who she was. Her wealth hadn't brought her true love. It only attracted actors and opportunists. A question burned in her mind, clear and painful. If she wasn't Isabella Sterling, would Liam have loved her? Would anyone ever truly love her for herself? Unwilling to hear another word, Isabella quietly set her glass down. She turned and walked into the shadows, leaving behind the glittering world that had just killed her heart for a second time. The darkness of the long hallway swallowed Isabella, but it couldn't silence the question screaming in her mind. If she wasn't Isabella Sterling, would anyone ever truly love her? That question followed her into her room, clung to her as she slammed the door, and tormented her through the long nights that followed. Sleep became a luxury. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Liam smile, but it was accompanied by the sneering laughter of those guests. Love and betrayal, truth and lies twisted together, suffocating her. Her lavish bedroom now felt like a prison. She looked at everything around her: the designer dress draped over a chair, the sparkling jewelry box, the glittering New York City skyline outside her window. She realized that as long as she remained here, in this world, she would never find the answer. She would forever be the golden goose in everyone's eyes. A fierce resolve ignited within her, overpowering the pain and despair. She had to get out. She had to find the truth for herself. Grabbing her phone, her hand still trembling slightly, she called the only name she trusted completely. The ringtone pierced the late-night silence. "Hello?" Chloe Hayes' sleepy voice came from the other end. "Bella? What's wrong? It's almost 3 in the morning." Isabella took a deep breath. Her voice was quiet but heavy, with the weight of a life-altering decision. "Chloe, I need your help." Hearing the urgency in her friend's voice, Chloe was instantly awake. "Of course. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over right now?" "I'm okay," Isabella replied, "but I don't want to be me anymore." There was a short pause. "What do you mean, Bella? Don't scare me." Isabella stared at her reflection in the mirror, as if speaking to the very identity she was about to cast off. "I want to disappear, Chloe. I want Isabella Sterling to disappear. Can you help me become someone else entirely? That same night, Chloe Hayes arrived. She didn't use the main entrance, but slipped in through a service hallway, carrying two large suitcases filled not with designer clothes, but with her tools of the trade. Seeing her best friend's exhausted face and the fire of determination in her eyes, Chloe didn't ask a single question about why. She just nodded. All right, if you're sure about this, we're doing it right, Chloe said, her voice firm. First, Isabella Sterling has to die. At least her image does. Isabella's luxurious dressing room was transformed into a secret salon and makeup studio. Chloe picked up a pair of scissors. Say goodbye to your $500 a session blowout, she said, half joking. Snip. Locks of silky, meticulously cared-for blonde hair fell to the marble floor. Chloe didn't give her a bad haircut, just an unremarkable one, choppy, uneven in places. She showed Isabella how to tousle it with her hands to make it look naturally messy. Next, the skin, Chloe said, opening her makeup kit. Your skin is too perfect. It screams, I have a personal aesthetician. We need to make it normal. She didn't make Isabella ugly. She just stripped away her glow. A light foundation to dull her complexion, a few faint fake freckles across her cheeks, and a touch of shadow under her eyes to create the tired look of someone who actually had to worry about life. Isabella looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was still her, but also not her. The sharp, polished beauty had been softened into obscurity. Elegance was replaced by a simple, almost plain appearance. She looked like any other person she'd pass on the street. For the first time, she felt like she could blend in. What about a new name? Chloe asked as she cleaned up. Isabella thought for a moment. She wanted something close, yet different. Bella, she said. And the last name, Jones. Bella Jones. It sounded so normal. It was perfect. The plan was meticulously laid out. Isabella secretly sold a pair of diamond earrings to piece of jewelry with the least sentimental value for enough cash to last her for months. Chloe helped her buy a cheap, prepaid phone registered under a fake name. The destination was a small coastal town in Oregon, far enough from New York that no one would recognize her, and quiet enough for a fresh start. Finally, the clothes. Isabella's entire designer wardrobe was left behind. Chloe took her to a thrift store where Isabella awkwardly picked out faded jeans, a few simple sweaters, and a generic windbreaker. As she put on the unfamiliar clothes, Isabella felt a strange sensation. They weren't soft like silk or cashmere, but they gave her a sense of freedom she'd never known. A few days later, early one morning, a woman with messy hair, a tired complexion, and simple clothes carried an old suitcase out of a modest apartment building in the suburbs. She had no bodyguards, no limousine. She walked to the bus stop, blending in with the crowd of people hurrying to work. As the bus headed west toward Oregon, Bella Jones looked out the window and watched the Sterling Tower shrink into the skyline until it disappeared completely. She didn't feel a sense of loss. She just felt that, finally, she was beginning to live. The coastal town in Oregon looked peaceful, but Bella quickly learned that in a place this small, everyone watched and everyone talked. The first time Bella walked into the town's only coffee shop, all conversation stopped. Every head turned to stare, their eyes scanning her from her unkempt hair down to her worn-out sneakers. She nervously ordered a coffee and found the most secluded corner table, but she could still hear the whispers behind her. A stranger, looks like she's from the city. Probably ran here to escape some trouble. Bella felt like she was being dissected from every angle. It was the same at the grocery store. The owner, who had been laughing with the previous customer, turned cold the moment it was Bella's turn. Her eyes swept over Bella before settling on the shopping basket containing only a few cheap items. "New in town?" she asked, her tone clipped. "Yes," Bella answered quietly. "This ain't the city," the woman stated, a sentence without a beginning or an end. But Bella understood her meaning. You don't belong here. No one spoke to her openly. Friendly smiles seemed to vanish as she approached. It turned out whether she was rich or ordinary, she was still judged. The loneliness here was worse than in New York because here she was utterly alone. The only place she felt at peace was the old bookstore where she worked, surrounded by silent pages, until one day Caleb Taylor walked in. He was tall and rugged, wearing a simple t-shirt. What was different was that he didn't stare at her. He looked at the bookshelves with genuine interest. When he came to the counter, he smiled, a completely natural smile. "Hi," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I'm looking for a book on steam engines. Can you help me out?" In all the weeks she'd been there, he was the first person to speak to her so normally. Bella was a little taken aback. "Oh, yes, of course. Let me see." While she searched, he told her he was restoring a vintage car and wanted to understand its mechanics better. When Bella handed him the book, he thanked her politely. "Thanks. I'm Caleb," he introduced himself. "I'm Bella," she replied. "Bella," he repeated her name warmly. "It's nice to meet you." From then on, Caleb would stop by occasionally. He never asked probing questions about where she came from or why she was there. He just talked about books, his work, and the kids he was teaching auto repair. To Caleb, she was simply Bella, the girl who worked at the bookstore. His normal treatment of her was the most extraordinary thing she had experienced there. Slowly, it began to put her at ease. It was a quiet afternoon. Bella was smiling to herself as she dusted off old book spines. For the first time in weeks, she felt a real sense of peace. The town had gradually gotten used to her presence, and the prying eyes had diminished, especially after Caleb had stopped by a few times and chatted openly with her in front of others. Suddenly, the bell on the bookstore door chimed insistently, and Caleb burst in. His usual calm expression was gone, replaced by a scowl of worry and anger. "Bella," he said, his voice urgent, "you need to see this." Bella was surprised by his demeanor. "What is it, Caleb? You look." "Just watch," he interrupted, holding his phone out in front of her. A video was playing on the screen. Bella squinted. She saw a woman who looked familiar, fumbling amidst a pile of fallen books on the floor. Then she realized it was her, from a few days ago. The video was shot from a malicious angle, focusing on her flustered face and plain clothes. A man's voice could be heard dripping with mockery. "Look at this disaster. Let me capture this perfect moment for everyone to see." The memory of that day flooded back. The expensive sports car. The guy with slick back hair and a smug grin Preston Pierce. She remembered feeling numb as she realized he was pointing his phone at her instead of helping. At the time, she dismissed it as a rude gesture and forgotten about it. But now, she saw that video was posted on social media. Below it was the caption, "Visited the local bookstore and ran into the klutz of the year. Total disaster number, stay home." The post showed tens of thousands of views and hundreds of comments filled with laughing emojis. Bella's face went pale. It felt like someone had just thrown a bucket of ice water on her. "That guy is a real jerk," Caleb said through gritted teeth, his anger undisguised. "One of the kids in my workshop showed it to me. They're all passing it around. I'm sorry, Bella. I didn't want you to have to see this, But I thought you should know. Bella couldn't hear what Caleb was saying anymore. A ringing filled her ears. She had run from the judgmental world of New York, made herself invisible. But even as a nobody, she couldn't escape being turned into a joke. Just because she was clumsy. Just because she wore old clothes. The small, peaceful world she had tried to build in this bookstore had been violated. She looked up at Caleb, the hurt clear in her eyes. "It turns out," she said softly, her voice breaking, "you can't hide anywhere." The storm from Preston's video caused Bella to retreat into herself. She went to the bookstore, worked in silence, and returned to her small apartment, avoiding all eye contact. But one thing was different. Caleb didn't avoid her. In fact, he came by more often. He never mentioned the video, but he would bring her a hot coffee in the morning or leave a book he thought she'd like on the counter. He treated her as if nothing had happened, and that sense of normalcy was the most effective healing medicine. A few days later, just as the incident was starting to die down, another storm erupted on local social media. This time, the main character was again Preston Pierce. He posted a series of photos and videos of him and his friends delivering cases of bottled water bearing his personal brand logo to the town's youth center. He posed for pictures with the kids, smiled brightly for the camera, and ended with a long, sappy post about the importance of giving back. The hashtags number doing good, number inspire, and number charity filled the post. Bella scrolled through the images with an indescribable feeling. Everything looked so polished, so perfect, but it also felt so fake. That evening, on her way home, she passed by Caleb's auto repair garage. Even though it was late, the lights were still on. Curious, she peeked through a crack in the door. Caleb wasn't alone. He was bent over an old car engine, and beside him was a teenage boy. Bella recognized him as one of the kids who had pointed and laughed at her after watching Preston's video. But now, the boy didn't look cocky at all. He was listening intently as Caleb patiently explained each part, his hands greasy as he carefully tightened a bolt. There were no cameras, no audience, no flashy hashtags. Just a man quietly giving his time to teach a kid a trade, to give him direction and keep him out of trouble. The contrast between the two images struck Bella powerfully. Preston used a few cases of water to polish his image in front of thousands. Caleb was silently changing a single person's life. Yet the world only praised people like Preston, those who knew how to turn kindness into a performance. And the genuinely good people like Caleb went unnoticed. The sadness in Bella's heart slowly turned into a cold anger. She was tired of running. She was sick of a world where a person's worth was measured by their appearance and the number of likes they got online. She realized that to expose someone like Preston, who lived for his image, she couldn't use the timid Bella Jones. She had to use the weapons of the very world she had abandoned. A plan began to form in her mind, clear and audacious. That night, Bella opened her old suitcase and pulled out an expensive smartphone she had hidden at the bottom. It was her only remaining link to her old life. She dialed a number she knew by heart. "Hello," a professional voice answered on the other end. It was her father's assistant. Bella's voice was no longer that of the shy bookseller. It was cold, decisive, and full of authority, the voice of Isabella Sterling. "I want to organize a charity art auction," she commanded, "at the Sterling Gallery in New York. Have everything arranged in 2 weeks." The assistant was momentarily confused by her sudden return, but immediately complied. "Yes, Miss Sterling." "And one more thing," Isabella added, her eyes narrowing. "Make sure all the top media outlets and social media influencers receive an invitation. In particular, send a formal personal invitation to a man named Preston Pierce. Tell him it's the can't-miss high society event of the year. The charity auction was as glamorous and extravagant as Isabella had planned. Crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant light on the high society guests, and the flash of media cameras was incessant. In the midst of it all, Preston Pierce was soaking up his moment, a glass of champagne in hand, constantly live-streaming to brag to his thousands of followers. And then Bella Jones walked in. She looked exactly as she did in the coastal town. Her hair unstyled, her face nearly bare of makeup, and wearing a simple blue dress. Her entrance was a dissonant note in the symphony of luxury, immediately drawing every eye. Preston was in the middle of his live stream when he recognized the clumsy girl from his viral video. A smirk spread across his face. This was a golden opportunity to create more buzz. He walked straight toward her, his phone still held high. "Well, look who we have here," Preston said loudly, his voice dripping with sarcasm for everyone to hear. He pointed the camera directly at Bella's stunned face. "Hey there, you lost? Or did you think this was a charity event for the homeless?" He let out a loud laugh, which was met with a few chuckles from the surrounding crowd. In front of dozens of cameras and hundreds of pairs of eyes, Preston leaned closer to his phone. "Who comes to a black tie event looking like this?" he said, as if bestowing some great wisdom upon his followers. "This is exactly why the poor stay poor. They don't even know how to dress for the occasion." Every word was a slap in the face. Bella felt suffocated, humiliated. Unable to bear it for another second, she turned and practically fled the ballroom, leaving behind Preston's mocking laughter and the stares of the world she once belonged to. At the same time, back in the old garage in Oregon, Caleb was cleaning his tools when one of the kids from his workshop ran in, excitedly holding up a phone. "Mr. Taylor, look! That Preston Pierce guy is live streaming from some huge event in New York." Caleb wasn't interested, but when he glanced at the screen, he froze. Amidst the glittering crowd, he recognized Bella. He saw how lost and hurt she looked, and then he heard Preston's venomous insults and saw Bella's face pale with pain before she turned and ran. A surge of rage rose in Caleb's chest, but it was quickly replaced by an even greater wave of worry. He knew Bella was all alone in that vast, cruel city. She had no one. Without a moment's hesitation, Caleb threw the cleaning rag on the table, grabbed his jacket, and snatched his car keys. "Where are you going?" the kid asked, surprised. "To New York," Caleb replied, his voice urgent and firm. His pickup truck sped into the night, beginning a journey of hundreds of miles. He didn't have a plan. He had no idea how he would find her. He only knew one thing. He had to get there. He had to be with her. Backstage, Isabella wasn't crying. The tears were gone, replaced by an icy calm. Her fury had been compressed into a source of sharp, focused strength. She looked into the dressing room mirror, but she no longer saw the timid Bella Jones. She saw Isabella Sterling, the heiress to an empire, and she knew exactly what she had to do. Chloe was already there waiting, with an evening gown and her makeup kit at the ready. An hour later, the main doors of the ballroom opened once more. A hush fell over the room. Every whisper, every clink of a glass went silent. Standing in the doorway was no longer the simple girl from the bookstore, but a completely transformed woman. Isabella Sterling stood there in a breathtaking crimson gown, its exquisite design perfectly accentuating her figure. Her hair was swept up in a regal updo, revealing a graceful neck and a pair of diamond earrings that glittered brilliantly. Professional makeup highlighted her determined eyes and bold red lips. She wasn't just beautiful. She radiated an aura of power that commanded everyone's attention. The room was stunned. The media went into a frenzy of camera flashes. Preston Pierce, who had been the center of attention moments before, was suddenly forgotten. Like everyone else, he was gaping at the woman who had just appeared. He had no idea it was the clumsy girl he had just humiliated. To him, this was a goddess, the ultimate prize. He quickly ended his old live stream and started a new one. He had to capture this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he whispered dramatically into his phone, "I think I've just met the woman of my dreams." He quickly made his way toward Isabella, pushing through the crowd with the most sycophantic smile he could muster. "Good evening, miss," he said, his voice as smooth as honey. "I'm Preston Pierce. It is an honor to meet such a beauty as yourself here. The stars must have aligned for us to meet tonight." Isabella simply gave him an enigmatic smile, not responding. Her silence only made Preston more confident that he had made an impression. He held his phone higher, boasting to his followers. "See, everyone? The goddess of the gala. I think I'm about to win the heart of the billionaire's daughter." Just then, Isabella gently pushed his hand away. She walked straight to the main stage and took the microphone from the bewildered MC. The entire room was dead silent. "Welcome, everyone." Her voice rang out, clear and sharp. "Thank you for coming to this charity auction. Before we begin, I'd like to show you all a short video, a story about kindness and truth." With that, she gave a signal. The large screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the charity's logo, went dark. Then, it lit up with a familiar video. It was the cell phone footage of a clumsy girl in old clothes, struggling amidst a pile of fallen books. Then, Preston Pierce's voice boomed through the ballroom's sound system, loud and clear. "Who comes to a black tie event looking like this?" This is exactly why the poor stay poor. The silence in the room shattered. Everyone turned to stare at Preston with looks of shock and disgust. Preston stood frozen, his face draining of all color. He looked at the girl on the screen, then at the magnificent woman on the stage. His brain finally connected the two images. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Thousands of people watching his live stream had just witnessed the entire truth. Isabella raised the microphone again, her voice cutting coldly through the chaos. "The girl in that video is me," she declared. "And the man who just used sweet words to approach me is the same man who insulted me when he thought I was poor and worthless." The room erupted. The media swarmed Preston like a pack of hungry wolves. A barrage of questions was fired at him, cameras flashing relentlessly in his stunned face. In a matter of minutes, the reputation Preston had painstakingly built with fake images crumbled before the eyes of millions. While the ballroom descended into chaos over the shocking scandal, Isabella quietly left the stage and slipped into the quiet backstage area. The show was over. She had won, but she felt no joy. There was only a strange emptiness. She leaned against the cold wall and closed her eyes. She had exposed a fraud, but the biggest question in her heart remained unanswered. Just then, a familiar voice called out, breaking the silence. "Bella." She opened her eyes. Caleb was standing at the end of the hall, his jacket still damp with night dew, his breathing heavy from running. He had driven hundreds of miles to be here. He looked at her, not with awe at her glamorous appearance, but with the same familiar concern he always had for the bookseller from Oregon. Without a word, he strode over and pulled her into a tight embrace. His hug was warm, strong, and smelled of familiar motor oil, a world away from the perfume and phoniness outside. It felt like a safe harbor. "I saw everything," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry I didn't get here sooner." Isabella shook her head, feeling a sting in her nose. Why are you here? Caleb pulled back, his hand still firmly on her shoulders. He looked directly into her eyes, his gaze filled with an honesty that held no trace of deceit. I don't care if you're Isabella Sterling or Bella Jones. I don't care if you're wearing a ball gown or old jeans. I just know that the woman I met in the bookstore is kind, smart, and strong, and I was worried about her. He paused, then said with all his courage, and I love her. I love the real you, Bella. I love the real you. Those words, the very thing Isabella had been longing to hear, had finally come from the most unexpected person. The tears she had held back for so long finally streamed down her face, but they were tears of happiness and release. She had found her answer. True love did exist. In the following days, the fallout from the auction was swift and widespread. Preston Pierce vanished from social media, but another figure was unexpectedly thrust into the spotlight. While covering the event, a few curious journalists dug into the story of the small town in Oregon and discovered Caleb's quiet work. The story of the dedicated mechanic who ran a free workshop for teenagers, the man who didn't hesitate to drive through the night for a woman in trouble, became an inspiring bright spot in the middle of a noisy scandal. A week later, Caleb received an email from an international automotive corporation. They had read his story. They were impressed not only by his technical skills, but by his heart and integrity. They offered him the position of head engineer for their new community development project. Success had found him, not through self-promotion, but through the genuine values he lived by. Isabella and Caleb made their relationship public. They no longer hid from the media. During their first interview, when a reporter asked Caleb how it felt to be in love with one of the richest women in the world, he smiled and squeezed Isabella's hand. He looked straight at the camera and said with sincerity, I'm not in love with a billionaire heiress. I'm in love with Bella, the girl who used to sit and read in a little bookstore. His words instantly went viral. They were shared millions of times on social media, becoming a trending quote about true love. It wasn't just a declaration of Caleb's love. It was the perfect ending to Isabella's journey. She had given up everything to find something priceless, and in the end, she had gained it all.